Meet Tim Gurner, one of Australia's richest people, saying the quiet part out loud.
I think the problem that we've had is that we have people decided they didn't really want to work so much anymore through COVID, and that has had a massive issue on productivity. Tradies have definitely pulled back on productivity. They have been paid a lot to do not too much in the last few years, and we need to see that change. We need to see unemployment rise. Unemployment has to jump 40, 50% in my view. We need to see pain in the economy. We need to remind people that they work for the employer, not the other way around. I mean, there's been a systematic change where employees feel the employer is extremely lucky to have them, as opposed to the other way around. So it's a dynamic that has to change. We've got to kill that attitude, and that has to come through hurting the economy, which is what the whole global, the world is trying to do. The governments around the world are trying to increase unemployment to get that to some sort of normality. And we're seeing it. I think every employer now is seeing it. I mean, there is definitely massive layoffs going off. People might not be talking about it, but people are definitely laying people off, and we're starting to see less arrogance in the employment market, and that has to continue because that will cascade across the cost balance.
The cost of living crisis to make a killing. The cost of living, 'cause I'm someone somewhere else suffering in silence. The invisible, 99% to blame. Snuff and whistleblowers, brain bleaching. It's class war. It's a 39-year-old as they rock up to the bank. Not for money, but to take food out, but taste it right, can spit it out, so suck it up, shut your mouth. Strips you of your dignity.
Hey, it's Andrea Chalupa. I'm a journalist and filmmaker and the writer and producer of the journalistic thriller Mr. Jones, about Stalin's genocide famine in Ukraine, the film the Kremlin doesn't want you to see, as well as its disinformation agents on the far left and the far right, so be sure to go see it. And this is Gaslit Nation, a show about corruption in America and rising autocracy worldwide. Now, for our opening clip, Gurner, one of Australia's richest men, has since apologized since the internet beat him over the head for that. But in terms of how the business elite, of course, see us, it's that old saying I heard back when I lived in Ukraine in 2005, that the oligarchs see the people as the shit they grow their money in. That's how they see us, no matter whether they're from Australia, Ukraine, Russia, or Kentucky, or New York State, or Florida. That's how they see us. And to fight back against that, go to the Gaslit Nation Action Guide on gaslitnationpod.com. That's gaslitnationpod.com. There's so many ways to contribute. We need you now. We're all so much more powerful than we think, and together we're even more powerful. That is what all these unions are showing us right now. So we have to fight linked arms and take these assholes on together, because that is how we win. We chip away, chip away, chip away, and we make the work easier for the generations that come after us. The song you just heard at the top of the show was The Cost of Living by Prison Pen Pal. The song was sent to us by frontman Jerry Mandarin, a Birmingham, UK-based musician, self-described as, quote, an unpopular political songwriter working on diary entries set to music and released into the digital universe as soon as they have served their purpose in restoring mental health at the time of need. That is beautiful, Jerry. Thank you so much. Jerry provided this statement about the song. I originally wrote The Cost of Living last year as a mechanism to cope with the extreme cruelty and policies of the UK government and its effects that I could see with my own eyes in the city I live in. It's truly heartbreaking to feel this powerless, knowing it doesn't and shouldn't be this way. The lyrics are personal, but I hope universal if you walk around with your eyes open. I definitely remember Andrea saying, walking wallets more than once on Gaslit Nation episodes, so I had to pay homage, steal, and pair it with pedal poverty for alliterative purposes. Here in the UK, there is a mindset that no matter how bad it gets for you, you can always rest assured it's worse for someone else. Someone, somewhere else is suffering. This lack of compassion is a sickness that drives inequality and manifests itself with people turning on each other rather than looking up and holding power to account. I'm really pleased that you like the song and feel honored to have it on one of my favorite podcasts. I don't perform in clubs or bars, although I might give it a go after receiving the self-esteem boost from Gaslit Nation. Absolutely give it a go. Your work's fantastic. Everyone will post a link to the cost of living on our social media pages and in the show notes for this episode on our Patreon page. You can find more of Prison Pen Pals music on SoundCloud. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us, Jerry. Now, I have a confession to make. Understand, I have 2 little babies. One is homesick, so my mind is reeling. I have a terminally ill loved one in my immediate family, so I'm in therapy. I'm reading all the self-help books I can get my hands on right now. I'm struggling right now, but I'm doing this show because it's my creative outlet and I love it. And this community is real, and this community has sustained nights of horror over the years. I've needed you. We've needed each other. But Jerry, I forgot we had a song feature this month. I almost ran the episode this month without it. And I quickly went back to include your song in this episode because we made a promise to you we would do that. And amazingly, I recorded this episode already, the bulk of it that you'll hear in the introduction audio, the introduction news roundup. I recorded the bulk of that before I really read what your song statement. And what I recorded and what you sent to us is completely aligned. We were meant to be, especially for this episode. You're completely right on theme for what's going to be discussed in this opening news roundup. Thank you so much for your music. I hope to see you perform one day. All right, so this week's show, we're going to do a quick opening on some highlights in the news that we should all pay attention to and stay vigilant of. And then the rest of the episode will be an excerpt of the August 5th live taping of Gaslit Nation at Caveat in New York City with the wonderful Risk Storytelling podcast by comedian Kevin Allison of the iconic comedy group The State, which launched the comedic careers of the geniuses Michael Showalter, Michael Ian Black, David Wayne, and so many more. Thank you to everyone who came out to that on a afternoon in the middle of summer to the Lower East Side with its rotting cabbage smell in the heat. We came together. I was extremely amazed that it wasn't just me on a stage with a microphone. There was nearly a full house. It was hard to get a seat if you came late. And it was a thrill to meet you guys and sign Mr. Jones posters and sign books and things. And a big hug to all of you who came out. That was really a thrilling, soul-hugging experience. Thank you, thank you. And we hope to do more events like that as we get closer to, yet again, another critical, most important election in our lives. We're all in this together. We're going to get through it together. And ultimately, we are absolutely going to win. So have confidence in yourself, have confidence in each other. We are going to win. If you're scared, if you're having a hard time sleeping at night, you are not alone. And a lot of people are channeling that rage, channeling that fear into building political power because there is no get-rich-quick scheme. There is no pill we can take. It is only rolling up our sleeves, doing the smart organizing work of bringing scientifically driven, empathetic people to power. That is how we flush out the system and bring a new talent to protect us, to safeguard our democracy on levels from dog catcher all the way up to who's running your state in all levels, okay? So it's building that state power. And you can join me and my friends. We have our own little group working on that. It's called State Fair. Look out for the link in the show notes on how you can sign up with us at State Fair. I'm doing that damn work with so many brilliant activists across the country, including Jerry from Succession, J. Smith Cameron, an extraordinary talent, extraordinary actor. And she is, sending texts and emails at all hours of the night, fighting for our democracy through our group, State Fair. So come join us at that. Look for the link in the show notes for this episode, okay? None of us are going to get through this alone. We all need each other more than ever. Now we're going to fight like hell for each other. That is how we win, and we are going to win. Now, I want to do a quick news look. Going into dark places together, shining our light. Let's start off with Biden joining the picket line. Let's be very clear about what's happening. Only President Biden is joining the UAW picket line. Trump will not be there. Trump is not wanted. Trump was not invited to that cookout. Okay, they're very clear that they do not want him there. So only Biden will be at the UAW picket line. He was invited, he will be attending. And that is wonderful news. Trump, as a consolation prize for his ego, will be holding a Nazi rally nearby. But let's be clear, because there's misinformation, disinformation out there. Only Biden was invited and will be attending the UAW picket line. So next up, the next Republican debate is set for Wednesday. Keep your eye on Nikki Haley if you can stomach watching it or reading about it. Haley is Jared and Ivanka's chance for a political comeback. That's who the Kushners are reportedly backing in this race. Look out also for the show notes in this week's episode on how Wall Street is rallying around the Republican candidates because dictatorships from Hitler to Pinochet come to power with the help of the business elite. As Cory Doctorow pointed out in our recent interview with him, Biden appointed Lina Khan, an Elizabeth Warren protege, as chairwoman of the Federal Trade Commission. And she is a well-known critic of big tech who is actually working to apply our nation's antitrust laws. And Wall Street and Silicon Valley hate her. And yes, as our opening clip showed, they will absolutely sell us out for tax dodging, to pay less in taxes, to hoard their wealth, to bask in their greed, even if it means ushering in an age of fascism, which will produce and further mass death, which will be a black hole that will be nearly impossible to crawl out of for future generations to come. Yes, they will do that, and they have done that before. And so Biden does have good people in positions of power. There is a group of reformers in his administration that are fighting the good fight, okay? They do exist. On top of this, I want to point out some breaking news today, September 26th, from the New York Times. U.S. accuses Amazon of illegally protecting monopoly in online retail. The Federal Trade Commission, again, ran by Lina Khan, the Elizabeth Warren protege, the Federal Trade Commission and 17 states filed a lawsuit against Amazon for, quote, illegal conduct in its online store and services to merchants, which stifled competition. That is big. So all of you that fought for Warren, understand what I've always said on the show. So-called failed movements just fertilize the ground for future successful movements. So all of us that made phone calls for Elizabeth Warren, that fought our hearts out for her, this is part of our legacy. So Warren is somebody that was a mentor of Lina Khan, and now Lina Khan is taken on Amazon, all right? And she's taken on big tech, and Wall Street hates her. And the disinformation echo chamber of the Republican Party hates her. And that's why they, along with the far right and the far left, are going to try to convince you that Biden and Trump are the same and elections don't matter. Do not listen to them. Do not listen to anyone out there who's trying to Edward Snowden us. Do you remember in the days before the 2026 election, from his perch in Moscow, Edward Snowden sent that infamous tweet saying the election of 2016 is basically the same choice. Ask a woman who has to suffer a painful miscarriage, a painful dead birth inside of her because her state has banned reproductive health care, and how that excruciating pain could put her own life in risk and orphan her children. So don't listen to anyone who's trying to Edward Snowden you now. Yes, we know very well that there's a Democratic establishment and they suck, but there is a movement of reformers driven from the grassroots up that is fighting like hell. So pay attention to those folks, know their names, and join us in doing our own work, and do not abandon them because they exist, and know both parties are not the same. Who would you rather negotiate with? Some asshole centrist Democrat or an full-on, full-blown Kremlin disinformation agent, mobbed up with the Kremlin dark money, dumb as fuck Republican, right? Who would you rather negotiate with? I'd rather negotiate with the Democratic Party establishment and work arm in arm with the reformers in the party. Okay, that's the two fundamentally different choices on the ballot going into 2024. And anyone who's trying to sell you otherwise, they're manipulating you. They've got their own financial incentive of like carving out that niche for them to sell their books, to make a name for themselves, to get notoriety, to create drama, because they're miserable inside. Whatever their motivation will be, they're lying to you, okay? So don't trust that Edward Snowden nonsense going into 2024. Meanwhile, according to a Morning Consult poll, 9% of voters see the Democratic Party as more ideologically extreme than the Republican Party, which famously tried to violently overthrow our democracy on January 6th, and right now is holding our government hostage with a shutdown over funding for Ukraine, which is ground zero in the global fight of democracy against fascism. Why is that? Because the left and democracy generally is losing the information war. We're now entering what I think we could call a phase of hypernormalization. And this is very important that people understand this. Okay, hypernormalization. In 2016, we had the shock and awe of the Kremlin helping Trump come to power. People woke up to the fact that, oh, actually, Ukraine does matter to the average voter in America, because that has been the laboratory of the Kremlin's aggression. And the same bag of tricks they used to try to entrench and further Kremlin power and corruption in Ukraine, they used on us, the American voter, who famously doesn't care about foreign policies in big elections. It's all about those pocketbook issues. And in creeps this extremely well-funded and extremely wide-reaching Kremlin attack on our democracy that brought Ivanka, Jared, and Trump and Bannon, the white supremacist leader, into the White House. And we've all lived with that trauma and that mass death ever since then. And so that was the shock and awe moment. It woke up a lot of people, it radicalized a lot of people that never saw themselves as congressional material suddenly started running for office. 2018 was that extraordinary turning point in our nation's history where people fought back in a meaningful way. And that blue wave of 2018 continues to this day. People are still entering politics. People are still becoming leading organizers. It changed people's lives. And unfortunately, I should have never gotten to that point, but here we are. As that time went on, we raged against normalization, demanding impeachment, even when Pelosi was shrugging it off. We had that episode called Impeach Normalization. But now with hypernormalization, the Kremlin-aligned party is increasing its influence, and the media isn't covering it, the mainstream media. The mainstream media continues to get Trump on their channels, normalize Trump, call him Mr. President, and the mainstream media isn't explaining to its listeners how deeply critical this moment is, where Russia has furthered its influence to such a point that no one even bothers to talk about it anymore. It's hypernormalization now. What does that mean? What is hypernormalization? Well, that term was coined by a Russian-born anthropologist named Alexei Yurchak, who is at the University of California at Berkeley. And he coined it in his book, Everything Was Forever Until It Was No More, which looks at the Soviet generation as it was crumbling to an inevitable collapse. And it described how people continued on as normal, even though the Soviet system was collapsing all around them, because no one could imagine an alternative. And that behavior of going through the motions created this self-fulfilling prophecy. That's where I feel we are now in America, where the Russian captured party can threaten to shut down our entire government, which has real-world implications on countless government employees paying their bills, putting food on the table, to national security issues, like urgent national security issues. And no one's really talking about that Kremlin connection and how successful the Kremlin has been in entrenching their influence. Kevin McCarthy is part of that operation. He's not held captured by the Matt Gaetzes and the Large Marges, the QAnon lady of Georgia. He is an extension of them. That's why he didn't make a deal with the devil. He is the devil. He's part of that. Zelensky, for instance, in his North American tour, wanted to address Congress because this shutdown, what are they holding us hostage over? Funding for Ukraine. What are they beating on about all the time on Fox News and the whole right-wing echo chamber? How it's Ukraine is all one big grift and it's all a corruption racket. And why are we giving money to Ukraine when Joe in Wisconsin is hurting and so on? The reality is there's enough to go around, especially, and there's going to be even more to go around if the corporate class, the business elite that are backing, especially the Republican Party, fucking pay their taxes. And not only that, but pay that wealth tax instead of funneling all their dark money operations and trying to chip away at our democracy so they'll pay even less in tax, okay? So there's plenty of money to go around. Victims of fascism should not be pitted against each other right now. But that is what the disinformation operation on the far right is doing very successfully. And it's now hijacked our government with the shutdown in Congress. And on the far left, it's happening too. I promise you it's happening on the far left. So I was listening to a left progressive radio channel. I was listening to Democracy Now!, which practices journalism. Sure, they've had some guests on that have spouted nonsense, but then Tim Snyder, the great historian, will go on and provide facts and much needed historical context, okay? Democracy Now! practices journalism. So you listen to a great program like Democracy Now!, and then shortly after it, you listen to that guy with daddy issues, Max Blumenthal, Sidney Blumenthal's kid, who is just spouting all this disinformation nonsense. Like, you're listening to it, and it's just anybody who would hear it, it would just think that Ukraine is just one giant Ponzi scheme and not an actual genocide where children are being brutally raped in front of their parents and where people are being full-on kidnapped and forced into Russia and never seen again. Okay, it is a genocide by every definition of genocide. And it's something that has larger implications for not just Ukraine and the region, but the world if Russia is successful there. But you listen to this far left radio and it's completely manipulative. It's completely one-sided. Yes, criticize Ukraine where it comes to corruption. I have done that to the face of officials, government officials of some of Ukraine's largest donors. I have called out corruption. I have put pressure. I've even screamed, okay? So it's not about having some perfect victim, right? No victim of any crime will ever be perfect. It's about our shared humanity and fighting for our shared humanity. And anybody who just manipulates you by focusing and inventing and hyperventilating over all the extremes, cherry picking and twisting the facts and leaving out all important context, that is a crime of dehumanization, right? It's dividing victims against each other when we should be all united in this shared fight. So I'm telling you right now, the disinformation war against the front line of global democracy is winning. Elon Musk succeeded in this. He further accelerated this. You're going to see some so-called resistance accounts that used to be really reliable in terms of their own moral standing, that used to be early on ringing the alarm of the authoritarian threat. And now they can't even bring themselves to explain to their massive following why LGBTQ rights matter, because they know it's not going to work well with Elon Musk's algorithm. They can't even bring themselves to explain why the fight in Ukraine matters to you, because they don't want to end up on the wrong side of Elon Musk's algorithm. Okay, so the way you tell who to trust right now in this moment that we're entering into of hypernormalization is go to your favorite so-called resistance account, a person that has helped you get through the horrors of the Trump years, go to their account and see how much they are centering the shared fight for all of us when it comes to Ukraine and LGBTQ rights and just the most vulnerable communities generally. Go to those accounts, whether they're even talking about those issues. If they are not, they care more about making money in this moment than they care about our democracy and fighting for the most vulnerable. And they're succumbing to this moment of hypernormalization, whether they realize it or not. That's why they call it hypernormalization, because it's insidious. It seeps inside of you. And a lot of people make morally compromised decisions in order to just take care of themselves. That's a hard truth and reality that we're facing right now, where when things feel very dire, people just look out for number one and fuck the vulnerable, fuck the communities out there. I'm looking out for myself. I don't have time for you. It's going to be demoralizing at first when you realize this, but we all have to have open, clear eyes now for a reason. If we're going to get through what's going to be a hellfire year for all of us and actually protect our democracy, we have to know now who to trust, who is a real authoritarian expert and who's not, because the real authoritarian experts right now are focusing on the number one front line for the global fight between democracy and fascism, which is human rights in Ukraine and ending that genocide now, and the icky, sticky issue that a lot on the left don't even want to touch, which is trans rights. And we're going to cover this issue as we go on because a lot of people have to be called out there, okay? Liberation for anyone out there is liberation for all of us. Giving is receiving, okay? So I don't care if some of these issues may make people uncomfortable. If it makes you uncomfortable, you may have to accept the fact that the disinformation war being waged by the right may be getting to you because it's everywhere. They have the more powerful, well-funded echo chambers, and that is why we need to force these conversations to fight back, okay, with scrappy little independent media that we have, and that's what we're going to do heading into 2024. Now, I want to finally wrap up this news summary with the wonderful John Fetterman, and thank you to the Gaslit Nation community that came together. We made 15,000 phone calls to Pennsylvania voters to get Fetterman elected, and now he is fighting to feed all children across America, to wipe out the vicious vileness of lunch money debt, get all kids fed out there. Biden and the progressives tried to pass real structural change with universal pre-K and their big Build Back Better plan, which they could still fight for, and we could all fight for in our states where we live. And of course, Manchin and Sinema, who are mobbed up with the genocidal corporate class, killed that. But that should be a promise, and that should be a big leading part of the conversation by Biden's team heading into 2024, because child poverty rates are spiking now. And John Fetterman has a solution for that. He's pushing for feeding children across America and wiping out lunch money debt. Okay, that is just one important thing that we need to build this social safety net that we need in America, because it's just a human right, having food on the table. When a child is hungry, how can they learn? How can they focus on school? How can they sleep? Are we the fucking Soviet Union if we can't feed our children? No. So thank God for Fetterman, and thank God for all of you Gaslit Nation listeners who showed up and made phone calls for him with me. And the reason I'm talking about Fetterman a lot, because he's the best, and also he's showing Democrats how it's done. They're going after him, the Republicans, and Republican mascot Joe Manchin are going after Fetterman for how he dresses in the Congress, right? All these corporate coal lobbyists, how they dress. I don't give a fuck about how they dress, okay? They're killing us. They're stabbing us in the face. I don't care if you're wearing a goddamn prom dress while doing that. Fetterman could wear a freaking Budweiser foam hat, as long as he shows up and he fights for my children, Vice President of Oxford. I love him, okay? And Fetterman is pushing back by writing on Twitter, if those jagoffs in the House stop trying to shut down our government and fully support Ukraine, then I will save democracy by wearing a suit on the Senate floor next week. That's how you do it. That is what you say. That is what we need from Democrats in all offices across this land. Thank you, John Fetterman. Hey Gaslit Nation listeners, in recent years I've been all about baby soft products for my two little kids. There's baby soft bedding for us grown-ups that I'm proud to endorse, and that's Cozy Earth bedding. Named one of Oprah's favorite things in 2018, Cozy Earth's best-selling bamboo sheet set is temperature regulating and incredibly soft. Cozy Earth's bedding collection offers a variety of luxury pillows, sheets, blankets, and more. Luxury bedding essentials backed by a lengthy warranty. Cozy Earth's linen bedding collection adds casual elegance to any space and captures the fabric's breezy, timeless appeal. Pamper yourself this fall with fresh, new bed linens from Cozy Earth, made from luxurious, high-quality fabrics you won't find anywhere else in the market. Cozy Earth provided an exclusive offer for our listeners today, up to 35% off site-wide when you use the code GASLIT. That's 35% off site-wide when you use the code GASLIT. And that's another way to support our show, by showing advertisers that Gaslit Nation is essential listening. So check out Cozy Earth today and get 35% off site-wide when you use the code GASLIT, GASLIT. Thank you so much. And now, without further ado, here's an excerpt of our August 5th live taping with the Risk Storytelling Podcast.
Hello.
Hello, hello, hello. Oh my gosh, welcome. This is so exciting. This is so different for both of us.
Yes, I never leave the house. I want to thank you all for being here on a Saturday afternoon in the middle of August. I'm so humbled and honored. I want to cry and hug you all.
Aww.
I am a toucher. I'm going to keep my hands to myself with my affection, but just know that I love you, and I'm so tremendously grateful that you're here. You have no idea. You have no idea.
Oh my gosh. I know. August, like so many people just check out of New York City, period.
But we're here, and we're going to fight, and we're going to win, and we're going to do amazing big things together. That's the plan.
We are.
And
we
this
are.
is the kickoff
we are the
event.
wave.
Yes.
We're saving this place. God damn it. You know, it's really funny. We were talking about how our two podcasts, Risk and Gaslit Nation, it seems initially like a bit of an odd couple. But in fact, we are really great, like, sister podcasts in so many ways. I was telling Andrea that so Risk is the show where people tell true stories they never thought they'd dare to share in public. And the stories are very uncensored. Some are hilarious, some are terrifying, some are kinky. They're just all over the spectrum. But around about 2016, for some reason, I felt the need to start being frank with the audience about, being concerned about our democracy. And I started getting emails on a regular basis from people saying, this is uncomfortable. Why are you talking about politics now on the show? Your show is supposed to be about people's lives. And that just made me double down, actually.
It was all white people saying that.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. We're going to play some clips from Risk later to show, why I feel so much that the political is personal and the personal is political. But the weird thing is, also around about that time, I started listening to Gaslit Nation and was just riveted by this podcast. And had no recollection. You know that thing that happens when you're on Twitter or whatever and think, wait, how do I know this person? I heard Andrea on Gaslit Nation and thought, oh, that's someone I know from Twitter. But that is not the case. How did we actually meet?
I took Kevin's very first storytelling class and then quit my corporate media job. Wow. Completely downgraded my lifestyle. I moved with my husband right around the corner. We're on Clinton. We moved the next street over on Attorney in a one box of an apartment where we fit like the couch.
Oh my gosh.
And I was going to make a big go for it to finally make Mr. Jones. And your class was one that helped me get in front of a room of people and just say, here I am, and I have a story to tell, and I'm going to tell it. I don't care what you think of me. And it was your class that helped me get my voice. I didn't make much money after taking your class. I had to hustle a lot of jobs and beg people for jobs for a very long time. And I saw a lot of friends in media just skyrocket past me. And my Ukrainian immigrant parents were deeply ashamed for a stretch, and it was quite tough to deal with. But and my dad, and I'll give a talk about the making of Mr. Jones. My dad will be there and be like, "Oh, it's true." He'll say that. But your class was really life changing.
Oh my gosh, this is incredible!
And now here we are.
It was life changing for me too, because I started Risk not really knowing how to tell stories. I have this philosophy that one should learn by doing and then as quickly as possible learn by teaching. So I started Risk, and then a couple months later I was like, okay, I got this well enough now. Let's start teaching it, which really helped me learn even more about storytelling. And I'm so honored to realize you were in my very, very first class. And here we are now. Yeah.
Fighting fascists. Leading the resistance. Just kidding.
But the main reason we're here is because of this incredible new book, Dictatorship, It's Easier Than You Think. Oh my gosh, I am so excited about this. Is the book out yet?
It's out. It came out in June. It was a bestseller before it even launched. It was announced and it became an instant bestseller.
Amazing.
And that's because of Gaslit Nation. That's because of the community. And because there was no marketing done. It was just us on the show going, it's coming. And we're really thrilled. It was something that we wrote during the hellfire year of 2020. And I cannot believe we got through it. And to give back, one point I want to make about the book, to sort of share the secrets of storytelling that I learned from you, I learned from life. When people approach me that they want to write a screenplay, they want to write a novel, they start with like, well, what's your subject matter? And sometimes people will say, well, I want to get into the head of a psychopath. I'm like, do you really? And because the number one rule when you write a book like this or any project, and again, because storytelling podcast, storytelling teacher, and then the student is becoming the teacher. But the number one rule is you want to choose a subject matter that you want to spend time with. So all the years when I was in the romantic wasteland of New York City before I met my husband, Gareth Jones was my imaginary boyfriend. He was nerdy, he was super hot, he was heroic, he had this extraordinarily strong moral streak that I wanted to cling to make my own way through life. And so he was hanging out with me in my apartment in like the far-flung corners of Bushwick. It was Gareth and I against the world. And so with making this book, Dictatorship, It's Easier Than You Think, who would I want to hang out with during the hellfire of 2020 when Trump is so obviously trying to do more than that 45-page indictment laid out, which is, overthrow our democracy in real time. We all lived through that. We all watched it happening. And so I wanted to hang out with Cary Grant. I love Cary Grant. I watch Arsenic and Old Lace every Halloween. It takes place in Brooklyn. And so I wanted to cozy up with my boyfriend, Cary Grant. So Cary Grant is the wily narrator who takes you on all the adventures of becoming and trying to stay a dictator. Well, who else do I really love and admire? And that's Stephen Colbert. And I remember when he had the Colbert Report, which is where he played that guy that got one of the sexual harassers at Fox News, Bill O'Reilly.
Bill O'Reilly, right.
It was a funnier show than what he's doing now, but and so I wanted to hang out with the Colbert Report. So that's what this book is. It's Cary Grant meets the Colbert Report. And so that's my storytelling 101. Write stories featuring people that you actually want to spend time with, because that's what you're ultimately going to be doing as a storyteller.
Oh my God. That backstory is hilarious and amazing, because one of the things that so impressed me about the book is that as crucial as the information in it is, it's very entertaining. It's very compelling and has a spirit of adventure and fun about it, even though it's about such
Ron DeSantis.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I was in college, I went to Shakespeare and Company across the street from my school, the Tisch School of the Arts, and found a graphic novel about Carl Jung and another one about Noam Chomsky's theory of how the media works. And those books changed my life, because graphic novels can be such an entertaining way to take in huge ideas. And that's exactly what this reminded me of. Reading this book afterwards, I was like, okay, I'm kind of changed by this book.
Thank you so much. Well, we don't delve into the genocide denial that Chomsky's now wading into when it comes to Ukraine. So we actually fact check the Chomskys out there with this book.
Yeah, and it's so chock full of fascinating stories. One of the things, when the scales fell from my eyes with the story about George Bernard Shaw, who was another person who was kind of a hero of mine when I was a kid, because I was a fan of My Fair Lady, which is based on his play Pygmalion. Was that you? Was that you or Sarah that was kind of a fan of that musical?
Oh, obviously me. I did the whimsical stuff. I'm the theater nerd in this couple. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it was such a shock to me to learn that he was, not only this great playwright and, passionate socialist, but also a huge fan of Stalin. And it was really interesting, because that was one of the ways you guys start to unpack how people from all strata of society can be, quote unquote, useful idiots, with the way that he was out there making the case for Stalin in the press as just being this playwright. So very interesting.
Oh, yeah. No, the whole thing is a time capsule of how we got here. We take names like Jeff Zucker has his own section for what he did at CNN and helping bring Trump to power. It's really going after all the enablers.
Yeah.
And what was really interesting is when we did the final fact check, that's when Putin unleashed his total war in Ukraine.
Wow.
And you saw all of this viral disinformation going around, like J.J. Mearsheimer, a political scientist at the University of Chicago. I had Gaslit Nation listeners sending me his viral clip saying how it's NATO's fault. This horrific genocide in Ukraine by Russia is obviously NATO's fault, according to Mearsheimer, who it turns out is snorting lines of Koch dark money. He's connected to the Koch political network. When that was going around and Gaslit Nation listeners were bringing me that clip saying, what do you think of Mearsheimer? I'm like, what Mearsheimer is saying could only be true if Soviet history did not happen. And the reason why NATO expanded is because the Russian Empire, whether it's the Soviet Union or the time of the Tsars, was always imperialistic, and they're always carrying out their conquests through genocide, where you come in and you liquidate the elites, you come in and you murder anybody who's trying to stand up to you, you use rape, systemic rape as a weapon, and you take people's homes, and you force everyone to speak Russian, think in Russian, and their culture is eradicated. That's what happened in the Baltics. That's what happened in Poland. That's what happened in Ukraine, as you see in Mr. Jones. That is why all those countries scrambled to try to get into NATO. It was to protect themselves from future genocides, because that was deeply traumatic in their history. So I did some changes last minute, which the editor was like, damn. and our amazing artist made some changes to push those facts in. just to combat in real time the disinformation that people on the far left and far right were spreading.
Well, that is like the most striking thing about not just this book, but your entire project with Gaslit Nation is we do live in this time in which disinformation is so all over the place. What would you wish that the average American, who might tend to think of themselves as being in the middle or maybe even leaning a little bit, that they would ordinarily maybe vote for Democrats, what do you hope
The white moderate that MLK talked about.
Yes, exactly. That they start to pick up on more in these coming years.
Look, we're dealing with a whole new science and psychology because the disinformation, it's separating families. And that's been going on in Ukraine for years with the Kremlin disinformation. And you have relatives in Russia with, Ukrainians getting their homes bombed, and the relatives in Russia are like, oh, that's not really happening. And so it's a crisis that the whole world is dealing with. And we're forced to figure out how to live with this and protect ourselves from it because it takes lives, as we saw with COVID, obviously. And I think in this case, how do we get through to the white moderate? I mean, MLK, you could just hear the frustration in his voice when he was trying to get through to the white moderate. And I will answer that by talking about the larger point of this moment in history we all find ourselves in, which is Trump, right? We've had this indictment. It just came through. We're grateful for something after Merrick Garland, but it's not going to ban him for running for president. There's no 14th Amendment triggered here. And there's justification for that. That is, we could talk in another conversation, but we're currently in this moment of time, he's running for president. He's got a proudly fascist, consolidated KKK base. And he narrowly lost some of these key states the last time around. It is as scary as it looks, but there are some hopeful signs. And one thing that people have to remember, what the white moderate has to remember, and what white people have to remind themselves of, is Trump's always been there. Since the start of America, Trump has always been there. Trump is the norm. Trump is the norm. This is the latest Trump that we're going up against. And it's absolutely true. What the 6019 Project says is absolutely true. American history is authoritarian history for non-white people. There wasn't just a genocide of Native Americans, they're also enslaved. And then, of course, you have the Holocaust of slavery. And so all the progress we have is communities like Ukrainians are doing right now against Russians, fighting for survival. All of our rights that we have are the most vulnerable communities fighting for their children, fighting for their survival. I remember signs in Euromaidan in the 2013 revolution. You had a mom out in the square where the riot police were going to come with their batons, and she had just had a simple sign that said, Ukraine is my child. Ukraine is my child. We owe all of our rights to people like that who said, this is my child. This is what I'm fighting for. And so to the white moderates out there, they just have to understand that this has always been here. Trump's always been here. But now he's going to come after you too.
Right.
Because of climate change, the pandemics are going to be more frequent, right? And the diseases are going to be spreading among us. Because of climate change, you're going to have flooding in homes and all sorts of things. And understand that you need someone in charge that believes in good governance, who believes in stability. Because if you have a fascist in power, he doesn't care if you live or die. If you have somebody who is completely bought off, like some of these centrist Democrats, like the Kristen Sinemas and Manchin being the most extreme examples of those. But there's other centrists that fly under the radar. If you have somebody who is just short-sighted, cashing in, selling us out, thinking that they're just going to escape into their pod in the sky or to New Zealand, that's not a thing. It's not possible. What they have to understand is that if we don't all rally right now and come together as a community and fortify our communities and stay engaged and fight like hell, it's going to be game over for civilization. And what we're up against is really an endurance test. I know all of us want to go on our vacations. We all want to check out, and absolutely a trillion% do that, because that's what we need you to do to stay going, because we need us all to do more self-care and take care of ourselves. But the one thing I ask of everyone here, whatever your background is, whatever your experience is, as we get towards the next spring, start warming up, start doing your stretches, start reading your inspiration, make your inspiration board, print out MLK, go to the Gaslit Nation action guide. And I go back to MLK all the time because the civil rights movement faced off with actual authoritarianism. They put their lives on the line. People died for those rights. That's where we are now. So if you go to the Gaslit Nation Action Guide, the very first book is written by a young MLK, he's in his 20s, and it's a case study on how he did the Montgomery bus boycott. And that's such a spiritual text. It's so practical, pragmatic. He opens it telling you, like, here's where my ideas came from. Here are all the leading thinkers I turned to for inspiration. Here's why some didn't work with me, like Marx. He's like, no, I don't believe that the ends justify the means. You don't kill millions of people to try to build utopia on Earth. It doesn't work that way. And then he talks about, now here's how to be a manager. Here's how to build teams and coalitions. Here's how to keep your ego in check. Here's what to do when you're tired. We open the Gaslit Nation Action Guide with that book for that very reason. That is a hand to hold. I go back to that book all the time when my soul feels depleted. That book's there for a reason. And so what I'm asking everyone in this room to do, what I'm asking myself to do, what I'm going to be doing alongside with you, and my husband's going to get dragged into this too, like he always does, watching the kids so I can be with you, is we're going to do what we can wherever we are with whatever we have, whatever your strengths are, whatever you have in you, stretch yourself, make some phone calls, knock on doors, write some postcards, write some letters. You can absolutely do it. And it's such an amazing thing once you get in the swing of it. In the last midterm election, which is good news, what happened in the last midterms was wonderful news for us. No election denier won a single big office in any of the key states we need to win to protect the Electoral College. We fortified the blue wall. We won big in Arizona. We protected ourselves. We did what we had to do in the last midterm elections to have a stronger chance in 2024. We're good. We did some really good work that we're going to be able to build off of in big ways in 2024. We flipped the Pennsylvania House. We put a lot of fortifications into our democracy on the all-important state level. That's our community. Gaslit Nation got together, and we had several get out the vote events. We made several tens of thousands of phone calls to some of these key races, including 90,000 phone calls for Senator Warnock in Georgia. We did that together. I, with baby and a toddler and this job and all sorts of things and all sorts of stress, just like you, I made over 1,000 phone calls.
That's incredible.
I made over 1,000 phone calls. And I'm telling you, as someone who's shy and introverted, and thank God for these lights because I can hardly see you guys. It's a really scary thing to pick up a phone and call a complete stranger who has a million other things they'd rather be doing than talking to you. You get those calls. You hang up on those people all the time, just like me. It's a numbers game. It's a volumes business. And so as you go through your calls, you're always going to reach that one person that desperately needs to talk to you because they're scared, because they're in some corner of Arizona and they're gay and they're scared and they're worried about genocide towards people like them. And you're going to find that person and uplift them and give them a shot of courage. That's what you're making those phone calls for, to reach the Americans across the country who are scared just like you and need to hear your voice. And it's an extremely powerful thing, and it makes an impact, and it is how we were able to win as much as we did in the midterms. And we're going to have to do that all over again, and we're going to do it together.
Oh, you are such an inspiration.
Stop, you are. I'm here because of you. Thank you.
Yes, I remember turning to the podcast and to the page you had on your website with the guide for activism around the election as a support. And I also have to say that the activism that I did get involved with around the George Floyd period and then the last election really did become like a spiritual sort of experience for me. Really was inspiring.
Exactly.
The Black Trans Lives Matter march that we did in Brooklyn in the summer of 2020 was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had, to see how community. I have a friend who's an activist who always uses the phrase, "we keep us safe." And that's what it's all about. That's incredible.
And we're ultimately going to win. We're ultimately going to win because we just are. I mean, I look to Ukraine a lot for guidance because it's a country that should not exist after all the genocides and Chernobyl, everything it's faced, and the resilience there, the defiance there. They didn't expect the world to come to their aid. They really did not, because that's been the track record. Angela Merkel led a policy of appeasement of Russia for so long that allowed the Russians to get entrenched like they did and gave Putin the green light to go total war. And so the Ukrainians really Like Zelensky stayed in Kiev thinking, I'm on my own. And that's very Ukrainian. And a lot of that country's idea of self and resilience and defiance comes from their artists, because artists are subversive. Like when you're doing art right, like you're fearless. It's a spiritual practice. You're speaking with a higher mind. And the very idea of Ukraine has existed for centuries through its leading thinkers, through its artists. You had these young hipster kids out on the square in Euromaidan in the big revolution for dignity, holding up placards of like Ukraine's Walt Whitman, Taras Shevchenko, like Ukraine's like Lesya Ukrainka, who's a big time feminist playwright. Imagine like us marching with like Walt Whitman signs, you know what I mean? Like that's what Ukrainians did. So just remember, for the creatives out there, for the storytellers out there, I told Kevin this before we came out, I'm like, we need you, people like you right now. We need the creative people. Tell your stories. Whatever your comfort zone is, for the story that most pulls on your heart, that's the story the world needs out of you. And it doesn't have to be some very serious genocide film like Mr. Jones. You know, I remember like, I sort of like I'm throwing my dad under the bus, this conversation, but I remember my dad going, hey, you're a young woman in New York City. Why don't you tell like those stories? Why are you doing this screenplay, you know? So my dad wanted me to write like Lena Dunham's Girls, you know, that's what he wanted me to do. And when that came out as this cash cow, my dad's like, see? I'm like, but that's not me. That's not what I want. I want to do this thing. And so whatever that thing is, that comfort zone, we need that. I'll just give you a very quick example. So when November 8th, 2016 happened, and keeps happening in our minds, when Trump came to power with Russia's help, my sister, Alexandra Chalupa, who was an independent DNC contractor who put her life on the line, warning anyone she could, Democrat, Republican, the media, that if Paul Manafort, the Kremlin's longtime operative in Ukraine, was here running Donald Trump's campaign, that means the Kremlin was here running Donald Trump's, and she was right. She was right. I want to go on record in the history books in front of the whole entire world that my sister, Alexandra Chalupa, launched the resistance to Donald Trump at 3 a.m. on election night, when the whole world was shocked and falling apart, when Ben Rhodes was caught on camera by a documentary film crew in this great film called The Final Year on Obama's failures, his foreign policy team's failures, when Ben Rhodes is looking like, oh, I guess we he's caught on camera on election night saying, oh, I guess we underestimated the Russians. You think? So when the whole world was falling apart, my sister very calmly, very coolly, knowing that she had stuck her neck out so publicly that there's now a big target on her head, she drafted, calm, cool, collected, just drafted a memo, you know, saying the Russians are here. Here's what they did. We got to audit the vote. We got to look at the disinformation. This is the narrative they're pushing. Here's how they did it. Da-da-da. Paul Manafort is central to all this. Just typed it all up. And she's such a private person. She's not a cable news talking head. She's not a self-promoter. She's had Rachel Maddow's producer trying to get her back in the day, like 60 Minutes. Everyone wanted a piece of her. She's not that person. For her to break ranks and go from being a very private, shy individual to then taking this memo, very calmly, coolly putting on Facebook, where it went viral, where then Sarah and I blasted it out with our followings to make it go viral. She launched the resistance to Trump that minute when she did that, and they punished her for it. They relentlessly put her through hell. And I'm gonna change subjects, but I just want to say an update on her is that she, because of all that she went through, she packed up her family and relocated to Australia.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Ooh, well, here's to her.
American hero, American patriot.
Our discussion continues, and you can get access to that by signing up on our Patreon at the Truth Teller level or higher. To help people in Maui rebuild, donate to the Maui Strong Fund at hawaiicommunityfoundation.org. That's hawaiicommunityfoundation.org. And if you or a friend want to go to Burning Man next year, instead donate that money to the Ali Forney Center, the largest community center in the U.S. helping homeless LGBTQ youth. To help humanitarian aid in Ukraine, donate to Rosem for Ukraine at rosemforukraine.org. In addition, we encourage you to donate to the International Rescue Committee, a humanitarian relief organization helping refugees from Ukraine, Syria, and Afghanistan. donate at rescue.org. And if you want to help critically endangered orangutans already under pressure from the palm oil industry, donate to the Orangutan Project at theorangutanproject.org. Gaslit Nation is produced by Sarah Kenzier and Andrea Chalupa. If you like what we do, leave us a review on iTunes. It helps us reach more listeners. And check out our Patreon. It keeps us going. Our production manager is Nicholas Torres, and our associate producer is Carlin Daigle. Our episodes are edited by Nicholas Torres, and our Patreon-exclusive content is edited by Carlin Daigle. Original music in Gaslit Nation is produced by David Whitehead, Martin Vissenberg, Nick Farr, Damian Arriaga, and Carlin Daigle. Our logo design was donated to us by Hamish Smith of the New York-based firm Order. Thank you so much, Hamish. Gaslit Nation would like to thank our supporters at the producer level on Patreon and higher. Withrow C. Newell, Chick Quinn, Lily Wachowski, Sean Rubin, Todd S. Pearlstein, Kenny Main, John Schoenthaler, Ellen McGirt, Joel Ferran, Larry Gasson, Karen A. Deal, David Collier, Tatjana Birch, Karen Heisler, Ann Bertino, John Millett, David East, Ida, Joseph Mara Jr., Julie Matthews, Meganopolis, Mark, Barbara Kittredge, Matthew Womack, Sean Berg, Kristen Custer, William Barry Reeves, Emmy, Kevin Gannon, Mike Christensen, Sandra Collins, Katie Masuris, Emily Fenning, James D. Leonard, Leo Chalupa, Carol Golstad, Jason Banky, Marcus J. Trent, Joe Darcy, Ann Marshall, Jeremy Lewis, Trigve, D.L. Singfield, Nicole Spear, Abby Road, Margaret Romero, Jans Alstrup Rasmussen, Sarah Gray, Diana Gallagher, John Ripley, Leah Campbell, Jared Lombardo, Ann Marshall, Tanya Chalupa. Thank you all so much for your support. We could not make Gaslit Nation without you.